Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to part 5 of my Joseph's Losey season. Today we're going to talk about Stranger on the Prowl from 1952. This was the first film Losey made under a pseudonym, Andrea Forzano. This is a Region A olive Blu-ray, and in the titles it is directed by Joseph Losey, but obviously in the US it was under the pseudonym, even though the pseudonym is really for Losey and the screenwriter Ben Barsman, who was also blacklisted. This is the only Joseph Losey film that in the BFI archives has no material whatsoever. Joseph Losey never saw the film after it was finished, even though he did say it was re-edited and shortened, and you can kind of see why when you watch the film. It's again under 90 minutes, and you do feel there's a lot of things missing. I will say the print is decent, but there's lots of artefacts and scratches still present, so this is not a pristine Blu-ray print by any imagination. The actual images are pretty sharp, but like I say, there's lots of scratches. But again, this is another low budget film, even although by Losey standards he did have 86 days, which if you've watched the videos on the earlier films, he made films in like 20 days, 19 days. This was a fairly disastrous shoot by all accounts. Losey, like quite a few of his films, kind of got the gig because somebody knew somebody, the original director, who was also blacklisted. He kind of pulled out the project. It was produced by, or one of the producers used to be a culture minister for Mussolini, so it's kind of ironic that Losey would work for somebody who used to work with a fascist. Shot in Italy. As I say, this was Losey's first film outside the US, and the first film under a pseudonym, even though that pseudonym was actually for two people really. It stars Paul Muni, who at this time was about 57, and he's maybe a little bit too old. Losey wasn't a fan. Apparently Muni would spend most of his spare time with a tape recorder trying to learn the lines, and Muni apparently was terrified that working with Losey would get him into trouble and hurt his career. Obviously at this point he was past his peak anyway. He's probably a little bit too old for the part. It's a very simple story. It's another one of these films in Losey's catalogue which is basically about somebody trying to run away, somebody trying to escape, which again perhaps has parallels to Losey's own life. So Paul Muni is this vagrant. We don't get any backstory really, don't need one, and he is trying to get away from this Italian port by boat, strangely enough, because it's a port, and he tries to sell a gun that he has. Again, not really any explanation why he's got a gun. and unsuccessfully he sells the gun. So he's desperate for money, desperate for food. So he goes into a cheese shop and starts eating some cheese. And obviously the woman in the cheese shop's not too pleased with that. So she's going to get the police, and in the struggle he kills her. So he is on the run, and at the same time we have this little boy who again comes from a fatherless home. His mother is desperate for money and food, so he takes some milk, and unfortunately the pair of them are tarred with the same brush, and then we have a police manhunt for the rest of the film. Now obviously there's echoes of the Bicycle Thieves, there's echoes of two Carol Reed films, The Third Man and Odd Man Out, because the film is essentially an extended chase scene. There's nice kind of character stuff at the start with the little boy who wants to go to the circus, kind of talks to an old man who's taking an old horse for a walk, so he walks along with the old man, but then realises in fairly graphic detail where the old man is taking the horse to sell to the butcher. So there's a couple of nice little scenes where the boy kind of learns that the world is a little bit harsher than perhaps he initially thought. Paul Muni is basically angry and a bit like a coiled spring for most of the film. And we also have a female character who is in love with a famous cyclist from the area, but the cyclist, you can kind of tell, views her just as a kind of groupie and is not that interested in her really. But she has kind of posters and one of his tops in her flat. And this, at some point during the film, this is the flat where the little boy and the man, because that's what Paul Mooney's character's credited as, comes in, and she offers to help at one point, which I'll get to kind of the oddness of that in a little bit. And then it does finish on a fairly dramatic and well shot rooftop scene. But again, the film, there's not a lot to it. Perhaps, as Losey hinted, there was maybe a little bit more to it. But again, with Losey, there's a really good sense of and use of location. You know, this Italian port, which has obviously been shot to hell in the war. So there's lots of ruins. Losey apparently was paranoid about catching something in the ruins, so apparently had an assistant with a can of DDT at all times. Well, that's true or not, I'm not quite sure. But again, the use of locations is really wonderful, and it is shot very well. Losey said obviously there's problems, and sometimes they would shoot in a studio that should have been on location, and then they shot on location which they could have done in a studio. Losey didn't like the original script, which is a kind of common theme with Losey at times, but then Losey didn't write himself, so sometimes you just have to deal with what you've got. So it was a problematic film for Losey in many respects, and you can kind of tell. So the whole thing with the young woman, the shop assistant, within, you know, she's obviously never met Paul Mooney. He introduces himself by pointing a gun at her, but literally within 2 minutes she's kissing him, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But again, you could argue because he has the cyclist's top on, because he's changed out of his dirty clothes, he's shaved, he's did his hair the way the cyclist is in a picture, because she has a picture of the cyclist, that somehow, some way she's fantasising that he's the cyclist. But it just is a little bit rushed, to say the least. That it's like, oh, you're holding a gun. And it's not as if she's trying to seduce him to get away. So it does feel like, oh, we have to have a romantic bit in the film somewhere, even though it doesn't really make any dramatic or narrative sense, but we've got to have some bit of romance, which just comes across as being a bit odd. Plus, Muni's relationship with the boy does kind of change almost by the second. And again, you feel if there was a bit more character stuff and it was a bit longer, as Losey hinted that it probably was, because he's literally telling him kind of nice anecdotes and he's kind of being nice to him, and then like he just snaps at him, and then he goes back to being friendly and then he snaps, and it's just, again, it just seems to be rather rushed and kind of cut together. But again, as I said, Losey never saw the film, but he just had heard it was re-edited and shortened extensively. So again, who knows the film that we would have ended up with. But as it stands, it's not a great film. It's certainly an interesting one. I wouldn't go spending lavish amounts of money to see it. Again, the rooftop scene at the end is very well shot. It does have some moments of brutality, especially the bit of the butchers, where the little boy kind of sees a bit more reality. The final line in the film is, I think he understands about the horse, as this is almost like a coming of age through traumatic events for the boy, even though again we're guessing that his father probably died in the war. So again, it's an interesting film as far as Losey's journey, but as far as being like a must-see film, it's not. I mean, it's okay, but again, I wouldn't rush out and spend lots of money to see it. It's only if you're a Losey completist or you happen to be doing a Losey season on a YouTube channel. That's Stranger in the Prowl by Andrea Forzano, or half of that was Joseph Losey. So thanks very much for watching part 5 of the Joseph Losey season. Part 6 is Joseph Losey making a film with Dirk Bogarde. So hopefully you can join me for that. So this is Solid Ronin from Solid Ronin Films, saying thanks very much and farewell.